Hey guys, welcome to Ask Ping. We're back for another week of it. And our first question is actually a video submission, so let's take a listen.
Hey Ping, been a fan for a long time. Got into supercross, motocross around 93, 94. I remember everybody talking about Robbie Raynard, how great his technique was. I remember in all the photos you see, elbows high, great corner speed. Then you fast forward through the years. Obviously, James Stewart changed technique with the scrub and elbows down a little bit. Can you give us, from your perspective, a fast rider for a number of years now, what are like the main 3 or 4 differences between what was great technique in the early 90s versus like Chase Sexton and Jet Lawrence now are considered to have great technique? What are the main 3 or 4 differences between that era and now that have changed? Anyway, great content, man. Keep it coming. Thanks, Ping.
All right, I appreciate that. Good question, Jonathan. Thanks for sending that in, man. It's funny because I grew up racing with Robbie Raynard, and even back then, his style was just so buttery smooth, and he just looked like he wasn't trying no matter what he was doing, and it was so fun to watch. Stewart was a little bit different. He definitely looked like he was pushing harder, but it was still kind of an effortless look, and he was carrying so much more speed than anybody. It was frightening. So to answer your questions, kind of then versus now, the differences, and I would say if I'm picking 3 people whose style I would emulate as much as I possibly could, it would be Chase Sexton, Jet Lawrence, and probably Ken Roczen. I think those 3 guys just have a fundamental foundation, like a foundation of those fundamental skills that are so good, and their body positioning, their technique, that it allows them to go faster without taking as many risks and staying in more control. And so what are those things? What are the changes? Obviously, the scrub was huge, and we see that in all shapes and forms now, where in the 90s, Jeremy brought in kind of minimizing, or like if you listen to the Ezra Lusk Whiskey Throttle show, he talked about making space. Let the bike come to you, and then push the bike down nose first to kind of get the trajectory low. Scrubbing was just sort of the next evolution of that. So a few things. First thing is flat back. If you go back and look at like Johnny O and a lot of these guys from the 80s and even 70s, Brad Lackey, where they come out of turns and their back was rounded. They thought that like arching and rounding their back looked fast. I don't know what they thought, but if you look at any athletic stance, okay, look at somebody who's about to tee off on a golf tee. Look at someone about to shoot a free throw, about to take a snap in football. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Feet shoulder width apart, knees bent, butt back, and back rounded, kind of the opposite of what they used to do it. That is an athletic stance. Doesn't matter what you're about to do. That's the stance, the position you want to take. So why wouldn't that translate to a motorcycle? It does. It does perfectly. That position allows your body to move physiologically as it's meant to. You can absorb bumps. You have better control of everything. That is the position that you're seeing. And like I said, Chase Sexton and Jet are probably they're doing it perfectly. So flat back, butt out, or as Rhino liked to say, hips unlocked. Everybody liked to tease him for that, but it was spot on. You know, having your butt out rather than your tailbone tucked under. When you tuck your tailbone under, you lose the ability to move laterally this way. Tip it back, now your spine will move again that way and allow. So if the bike starts moving in the back, your body will just go with it. If you're rounded, then your whole body is going to move with the bike, not just your lower half. So that's very important. And then I think the second thing is going to be body positioning and cornering. Those of us from the old school remember you had to really get your weight up on the front of the bike, and foot up by the front axle was always kind of the standard, and that was to not just balance yourself and have a sort of a something you can catch yourself with if you washed. It was also to get as much weight to the front tire as you could. 2-strokes didn't have the engine brake that automatically kind of weighted that front end and set it. You had to do that with body positioning and braking. So the 4-strokes just changed a lot of things, and that's one of them. Now our seating position through a turn is a lot more neutral. You'll see guys kind of sitting more straight up, not way forward on the gas cap, just in the pocket. and a lot of times not even put their foot out in a corner. They'll come in on the pegs, maybe they'll sit, feet still on the pegs, and maybe they put their foot out for just a second as they hit the apex and exit. But a lot of times they're not even doing that. It's just foot on the peg all the way through the turn, seated, but you don't even need to put your foot out. It's just really changed the way we corner a lot. The 4-stroke engine brake loads the front end, so it's already biting, and you just get into your turn and do your business. So that leads to the foot on the peg sink through the turn, just allows you to take a step out of it. And then I would say lastly is it's not so much body position, but throttle control and less clutch. Those are the technical differences from then to now that have really changed. You know, back on a 2-stroke, you had to be lively on that clutch a lot. And with these bikes, other than maybe putting some tension on it into tight turns, you're not coming out of a corner and going rah, rah, rah with your clutch. You shouldn't be. If you're doing that, it's a mistake. So I would say those are the 3 biggest things. And if you really want to watch how you should look on a bike, watch Chase Sexton. The guy is doing it right. So thanks for that question. I really appreciate it. Jonathan, keep them coming, man. And I appreciate you using the video format. I like that a lot. So next one says, hey, Ping, congrats on the launch of Whiskey Throttle Media and Going It Alone. Loving all the new content you put out. I have a couple questions for you. Suzukis have had razor sharp handling and cornering attributes ever since the 80s. What, in your opinion, gives them all these characteristics? Is it head angle, wheelbase, front wheel offset, suspension design? What makes them unique from all the other bikes through the years? Suzuki really seemed to lean into this, and I'm curious for your thoughts as someone who's raced plenty of them. That's question 1. I will say it's a list of everything you just said. It was just for them a priority when designing a bike. And, you know, if you're going to have really good steering, you might give up some high-speed stability. And so I think they did a great job of finding a chassis that would corner without giving up a lot of that. And, but, you know, a lot of it is give and take. You know, for years, Suzuki also didn't have really good handling, the suspension side of things. So was that because the chassis was really set up to turn well? Did they just have, you know, valving settings off? I mean, a little of both, but a lot of it is give and take and just design. And these guys, you know, take some time. You come out with a new bike, it's usually a few years before you get it really dialed in. 2, here's it. He says, with the recent media launch of the Stark, it raised one question for me that I don't think anybody has really mentioned before. If you take the electric part out of the equation, a lot of people who've ridden them have said how much better it is as a motorcycle than anything on the market currently, with all the little features it's got and its attention to detail. Once they come to market and all the other OEMs get them and tear them apart, do you think that they'll have to come up with their own versions of all these little things that the Varg has as standard? For example, the foot pegs, the clickable chain adjuster, CNC split clamps. It will blow out the cost of what a current MX model bike is. Lastly, it says, I'm coming from the position here. I've never owned nor had the chance to ride a brand new bike before. For me, I simply cannot afford one, and am worried that all this additional tech will take any of the bikes I'd like to have one day to way out of reach levels for me. I've settled in to ride 10 to 15-year-old bikes because that's all I can afford. I work hard for my money, and I'm worried it's going to go to a level where it gets silly. Granted, I understand I'm a minority here, but I'm keen for your thoughts on it. Thanks, Ping. Matt from Oz. Matt, I appreciate the letter, and it's a concern I have. You know, I just saw Yamaha came out with their new 450, and I always kind of grit my teeth and look at the price tag, and I was happy to see it's still below $10,000. And I've had this conversation with multiple manufacturers, and there seemed to be a consensus that 10 grand it's like the ceiling. If we go outside of that, it's just going to price too many of our fans and our supporters out of the sport. And so I was glad to see they made all these changes, cut weight off the bike, all this stuff, and still kept the price under 10 grand. But to your point, I don't know. We're going to have to see how the Varg works. A lot of times these things seem great. They're cool on the first ride, but maybe they wear out or they don't work as well as you think, or there's a downside to them that you'll learn when you get a little more time on them. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Like I said, you know, let's just wait and see when the rubber meets the road, or the dirt, as it were, and we'll see how this bike works after some hours and in real world conditions, and then we can kind of see. But I hear what you're saying. I wish that these manufacturers would take that into account a little more, because we are just, everything's getting more expensive, and salaries aren't increasing at the rate of inflation, and it's a bummer. It's definitely putting some people out of the sport or putting them on the couch as spectators rather than participants. So, but I just think we need to wait. You know, there's some cool stuff about that electric market, but there's also some really big downsides. And I think it's just going to take a little more time to flush it out and see what happens. So, in the meantime, here's the good news. 125 two-strokes are cheap, they're fun, and at least until the last couple years, you could find them pretty cheap and easy and fix them up. So I'll see you out there on a 10 to 15-year-old bike having some fun, all right? Thanks for the letter. I appreciate it, guys. As always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week here at Ask Ping.